plane linked to Assad's escape from Syria returns to Damascus. The Syrian cargo aircraft that flight tracking data and Russian media suggest carried Bashar al-Assad and regime officials out of Damascus on the night his government collapsed has returned to Syria, landing at Damascus International Airport on May 14, 2026, after sitting idle at Russia's Hmeimim air base for more than a year and a half. The aircraft and Il-76T, registered as Qatar and operated by Syrian Arab Airlines, departed Hmeimim and returned to Damascus on May 14, according to Arabic-language broadcaster Al Arabi TV, which reported the return based on flight tracking data and confirmed the aircraft's registration. Russian Telegram channel Voyenny Osvedomitel, a military affairs monitoring account that tracks Russian military activity, also reported the return, noting that the aircraft had remained stationary at Hmeimim since arriving there in December 2024. The Il-76T, the civilian freighter variant of the Soviet-era Ilyushin Il-76 widebody transport aircraft, is a four-engine turbofan heavy lifter capable of carrying payloads of up to 40 metric tons across intercontinental ranges. The Qatar registration places the aircraft within Syria's civilian aviation registry, and its operation by Syrian Arab Airlines, the country's state carrier, gave it the legal cover of a civilian transport while it operated what appears to have been one of the most consequential flights of the Syrian conflict's final hours. According to Al Arabi TV's reporting, flight tracking sites show that the aircraft's last recorded flight before its return to Damascus was the outbound journey on the night of December 78, 2024, when it departed Damascus International Airport for Hmeimim just hours before the Assad regime's collapse was publicly announced, and the airport was closed. Al Arabi TV reports that the aircraft's flight path during that departure was subject to deliberate GPS spoofing or jamming, concealing its true route from public tracking systems, a detail that suggests the flight was conducted with active electronic countermeasures to prevent its destination and cargo from being publicly identified in real time. The flight tracking anomaly is consistent with what open-source aviation monitoring communities have documented about several aircraft movements in and out of Damascus in the final hours of the Assad government GPS spoofing the broadcast of false position signals to confuse aircraft tracking systems and public flight monitoring platforms like Flight Radar 24 has been documented extensively in the Eastern Mediterranean region, particularly around Russian military installations in Syria, where electronic warfare activity has been a persistent feature of the operational environment since Russia's military intervention began in 2015. Al Arabi TV reports that the aircraft is believed to have transported military officers from Damascus International Airport to Hmeimim in those final hours before the regime's fall, and Assad's flight to Russia were publicly confirmed. That inference is based on the timing of the flight, its destination at a Russian military base, and the circumstance of deliberate tracking concealment rather than confirmed manifest or passenger documentation, and should be treated as probable rather than established fact until Syrian authorities or independent investigators provide further confirmation. Assad himself is known to have fled Syria aboard an aircraft in the early hours of December 8, 2024, with Russian officials subsequently confirming his arrival in Moscow, where he and his family were granted asylum. The specific aircraft that carried Assad out of Syria has not been officially confirmed by Russian or Syrian authorities, and the question of whether Qatar was the aircraft that carried Assad personally or whether it carried other regime officials in a parallel or preceding evacuation flight remains unresolved in the publicly available record. Russian media reporting cited by Voyenny Osvedomitel describes the aircraft as the one Assad used, but that claim rests on Russian sourcing that has not been independently corroborated. What is confirmed is the aircraft's return after sitting at Hmeimim for approximately 17 months. Qatar flew back to Damascus on May 14, 2026, and has now been described by Russian media and the Voyenny Osvedomitel channel as having reverted to the ownership and control of Syria's new governing authorities, the forces that toppled the Assad regime, and have been consolidating control over Syrian state institutions and assets since December 2020 for the return of a Syrian Arab Airlines aircraft from a Russian military base to Syrian civilian control is a concrete trackable data point in the broader process of disentangling the assets, debts, and institutional relationships that the Assad government accumulated during its decades of rule and its final years of dependence on Russian military support. Hmeimim Air Base, located near Latakia in northwestern Syria, has served as the primary hub for Russian military aviation operations in the country since Moscow's intervention began in 2015 and remains under Russian military control under agreements that have not been formally renegotiated since Assad's fall, creating an ongoing tension between Syria's new authorities and a Russian military presence that was invited by a government that no longer exists.